I'm Mari Dangerfield, and you're listening to Sound of Stylus. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Sound of Stylus, a podcast all about the Stylophone and the people who do cool things with it. Each episode involves me interviewing guests about their Stylophone journeys, projects, and passion for the Stylophone product range. There's also a fun musical challenge or two. For anyone who doesn't know, a Stylophone is a battery-operated musical instrument with an electrical circuit keyboard that activates when touched with a metal point on a plastic pen called a stylus. But even if you're already familiar with the Stylophone, you're probably wondering a few things. Who am I? What do I have to do with the Stylophone? And why did I decide to make a podcast about the Stylophone? Firstly, my name is Mari Dangerfield. I'm a half-British, half-Portuguese musician based in West London in the UK, and I make alternative/electronic pop music. I released my debut album in 2021 called Love and Other Machines, and in June 2022, I signed to indie record label Dimple Discs. My Stylophone journey links back to the day I discovered David Bowie's music while watching a TV show called Life on Mars featuring Bowie's song of the same name on it. No, this song did not feature a Stylophone on it, but it did lead to my dad buying me a copy of David Bowie's Best Of CD, leading me down the rabbit hole of his entire musical universe. This came in handy about 4 years later, when I was writing original songs for the first time. The first song I ever wrote, when I was 18 years old, took me over 4 years to perfect. It was something that went to the back of my mind while I was at university, but that I intended not only to finish, but also record. Finally, around 2016, I'd completed the song and was going to produce it. Having first recorded an acoustic version with a friend at the time, I'd decided the song would be best off with an electronic sound. However, I barely knew anything about synthesizers. Then I remembered Space Oddity and the Stylophone, probably from a Bowie documentary. I decided I would buy one, and I did, second-hand from a shop on Hammersmith High Street called X Electrical. It wasn't an original Stylophone that had been invented in 1967, but a 2007 edition I would later discover. That didn't matter. As soon as I played it, I fell in love. While I was still figuring out how I would use a Stylophone on my original song, in late 2016, I was scrolling through social media when I came across a video competition by a composer called Jan Tiersen, best known for his music featured on the French film Amélie. He was looking for the most original cover of one of his pieces of music from his latest album at the time, Ursa. I decided I would enter with a Stylophone version of Portes Gorée. For anyone who doesn't know it, it's a solo piano work. So how was I going to play a piano part on a Stylophone that can only play one note at a time? This was when I discovered a cool trick. I divided the notes up into different parts on different scores and into small musical cells that I could quickly record in chunks. Any more challenging notes would be recorded one by one. Then I would pitch up or down any notes that went beyond the musical scope of the Stylophone, and flex edit any rhythms that fell out of line. Here came what I call multi-tracked Stylophone. Suddenly, lots of really fast notes in a row were possible on a monophonic instrument. Now I'd recorded Portes Gorée. Fast forward to late January 2017, and I'd been selected as one of the winners. The music video, filmed on the top of a London hill in early January with me in a beanie hat and mittens shaking in the cold wind, went semi-viral for a while. For some time after this, I'd forgotten about working on my original song and was focused on making more multi-track Stylophone covers to cater to the audience that had found me from the competition. It was also at this point in time that Dubrek, the company behind the Stylophone range, discovered me and began to send me newer products, and I even worked on a couple of sponsored videos with them, which led to a series of product tutorials for beginners. But my true passion was my original music. In early 2018, I teamed up with music producer Charlie Westrop, where I took my multi-tracked Stylophone to a whole new level. Creating a riff with the same technique I'd used on Portes Gorée and with Charlie's help, I gradually built what would become my debut single, virtually, from a layer upon layer of Stylophone. barely anything besides my voice wasn't from a Stylophone. By then, we were also using the Stylophone Gen X1 for effects and for the drums. And I also had a Stylophone beatbox or two. Virtually was released in September 2018, and while I've never made a song with quite so much Stylophone in it since, I've featured the Stylophone in many other original releases and YouTube videos, as well as a fully instrumental Stylophone version of my debut album called Love and Other Machines, the Stylophone Demos. In 2019, the Kingston University Stylophone Orchestra was formed by Dr. Leigh Kemp, and I've been lucky enough to be involved with them on and off many times since, documenting the process in the Stylophone Orchestra vlog series on my YouTube channel, and even contributing a tiny bit to the recording of their debut album, released in January 2022, as well as some live performances. So why did I decide to make a podcast, and why one about the Stylophone? I've been involved in some kind of content creation since at least 2016, when I started my YouTube channel. However, a podcast was something I'd never even considered until last year. It's the one thing I felt like I hadn't stuck myself into yet, and given what I wanted to talk about, it felt like the perfect medium. Besides, being a musician who works alone most of the time, it could only be a good thing for me to get out of my own head for once and listen to other people talk about music. In this episode, I've obviously failed to do that, but next time. Particularly as Dubrek have continually improved their marketing efforts, it feels as though more and more new groups and individuals are appearing around the world all the time that play the Stylophone in innovative and interesting ways, and I decided that I'd like to be able to showcase and shout about their work and have it all in one place. This podcast felt like the perfect way to do that. So, now that you know all about me, what on earth I have to do with Stylophones, and why I thought they'd be interesting enough to talk about on a podcast, get ready to enjoy the Sound of Stylus. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you could give the podcast a 5-star rating and share the episode on social media, tagging me at Mari Dangerfield and the podcast at Sound of Stylus. You can find us on Instagram at Sound of Stylus and on YouTube by searching Sound of Stylus.